But let's get a more detailed view of what was going on in Joseph Smith's parents' life, right? Because we know that does matter. What you are brought up in does matter. And I was doing some research on my own a while ago in terms of what was going on in Vermont and maybe some influences to Mormonism and beliefs. And it's actually noted that in Middleton, Vermont, this is an area very frequented by the Smiths, and the Smiths might have been very well involved in this cult. And there's a lot of similarities here to what LDS people believe and what this cult taught. Okay, this is in the late 18th century, so this is right before Joseph Smith is born. But there's a man named Nathaniel Woods, and he created this cult in Middleton, Vermont called the Fraternity of Rodman. Okay, he wanted to be a minister at a local congregation in Middletown, Vermont, but he did not get the job. Instead, they made him like an unofficial elder.
That is probably for the best.
Right. There was no authority behind his title, which I would say their church just made a mistake. They probably should have never even have done that.
Yeah.
He became upset, and he was eventually excommunicated from that church in 1789 for saying one thing and doing in contrary and persisting in contention. And that quote is from Zadok Thompson, History of Vermont. So that is a quote from an actual book in terms of the history of Vermont. And you can actually go look this up on like Vermont Historical Society resources. Like this is an actual cult that existed. These are real people that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyways, Nathaniel Wood formed his own church after getting excommunicated. Okay.
Yeah.
His church was composed first of his large family, but then it grew exponentially later. The core tenets of the church are this. This is what they believe. This is how it started. The church members were the new Israelites, and that there was a day of reckoning where God would destroy all the Gentiles. So Nathaniel Wood was then renamed himself to Priest Wood and was a leader of that vindictive cult. So he was kind of angry about what happened.
Yeah, and also just this is something that's going to come up a lot, not just in this show, but also in cultish in general. Almost every Christian cult is apocalyptic.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So
I only say that almost because there's some Christian cults that I don't really know much about. So
right.
Yeah.
So there's a book called The Angel and the Sorcerer. I'm going to give you a quote from here. It's by Peter Levenda. And this is talking about the Fraternity of Rodman. It's on page 19 and 20. It says, the fraternity began receiving instructions to build a temple. Since they were informed that they were descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, just hang on to that. The idea that the new world was the ultimate destination of the wandering tribes and had tremendous currency in those days, and groups like the New Israelites were formed along the lines of that beliefs. So other groups as well insisted that the Native Americans were themselves remnants of the lost tribes, while the 17th century luminaries, as Cotton Mather, who is an actual Christian, claimed that the red men were in fact devils, but he was not a good one.
Yeah.
Incarnate, since there was no mention of the Native Americans in the Bible. So Cotton Mather was a Christian, but at the same time, he was also a very racist man. But then his son actually had a big hand in reversing the racism that was occurring in terms of like even the Salem witch trials that were occurring. So there's a history behind him as well. But remember, Christians aren't perfect. But listen to this. So 11 years later, Nathaniel Wood is living. He is Priest Wood now. But then there's a man who comes to Middleton, Vermont. And this was a fugitive. His name was Winchell. Okay. And he was living on the outskirts of Middleton, Vermont, and Rutland County. But he was escaping counterfeit charges from Orange County, a nearby county. Source material on this incident is contained in Barnes Frinsby, History of Middletown, Vermont. It's by Rutland. It's was written in 1867. It's on pages 46 through 64. But anyways, he escapes counterfeit charges. He comes there. But Winchell himself, he was like a secretive man. He was like a hermit who lived on the outlying farms of the county. He then began making his money business, which was dowsing. He was a dowser. Okay. And also, they called them rodsmen. He claimed that through a stick of witch hazel, which was the specific wood it needed to be made out of, he had the ability to locate secret treasures. It's also noted that he tricked many of his neighbors to fund his treasure digging. But as the treasure was about to be found, something would occur that would hinder the finding. Do you hear the similarities between things that Joseph Smith Jr. did when he was growing up?
Yeah, again, he didn't really come up with anything, though.
Right, exactly. So Nathaniel and Winchell actually became acquaintances. And then the theology of Nathaniel Wood changed. All of a sudden, in quotes, it says, the divining rod became St. John's rod, and the whole business of the money digging took on an air of revelation and evangelism. The Middletown preacher shortly became conscious of divine inspiration revealed through the rod and commenced to issue political pronouncements which were taken as gospel truth by his followers. Believers began to exhibit signs of fanaticism under the spell of their faith in the nearness of the Almighty. So this was part of the social ferment of Vermont in 1791 to 1850. That's by a historian, David Ludliam. But anyways, the Fraternity of Rodman, they became known to do this, all right? Determine how long someone would live by the rod, locate plants, cure diseases, find treasure. And there's actually an account in the newspapers during this time that they told some young women that their clothes had the devil in it. And they actually removed all of their clothes and they just ran in a naked frenzy. It's absolutely nuts. And during the snow, too, actually. And then the rod guided them to a nearby mountain. And also they would receive, of course, messages from God from this divining rod. But eventually what happens is Woods makes a prophecy using through the book of Revelation that the end of the world was going to occur on the 14th of January, 1801. Okay? That God would send a great earthquake and all of the unregenerate and the worldly goods or gods or whatever would be destroyed. And then God would finally destroy the Gentiles in a final upheaval between good and evil. So this was going to occur according to Nathaniel Woods. In the leading days up to the event, there was something called the wood scrape. This was where the believers of Priestwood, Nathaniel Wood, put up signs on their doors warning of the impending doom in this town. But on the night of January 14th, 1801, there was a militia in Middletown. They did not fear Nathaniel Wood and these prophecies of these people, but they did fear the crazed maniac, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, they stood guard, but nothing ever happened. Of course, we're alive. January came and went, and his movement lost its fervor in Middletown, Vermont. And it's noted that Oliver Cowdery actually was a member of the Fraternity of Rodman. They left Middletown, Vermont.
That name's going to be super important.
Yeah, they left Middletown, Vermont, and guess where they went?
Is it Sharon, Vermont?
No, they went to Palmyra.
Sharon is another word for Palmyra. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that.
No, because that's not true at all.
Okay. No, they ended up going to Palmyra with the rest of these new Israelites. So there's connections between Joseph Smith Sr. and the Fraternity of Rodman. The LDS organization now says it's nothing but speculation, but it is noted that Oliver Cowdery was in the Fraternity of Rodman. It's in the New England Historical Society. They state this. It's been suggested that Joseph Smith's father was a member of Wood's flock and that his religious teachings, including the digging up of gold, was lifted straight from Wood's New Israel playbook. Skeptics about the connection suggest that it's just simply a means to cast doubt on Smith, as Wood's followers were not the most upstanding people.